Almost every regulation or supervision official that I talk to these days tells me that they have a risk-based approach, or if not, they intend to adopt one in the next couple of years. But what does it actually mean to have a risk-based approach? And how does that relate to other supervision strategies? My name is Alte Kastorp, and this is Supervision Strategy. Last time we discussed a particular method, 5 whys analysis. This time rather we're discussing overall strategies or approaches to supervision. Now of course, to an extent, every supervision agency has its own unique strategy. And they should, because what is an adequate strategy depends on your particular context. Is your agency set up recently, or is it well established? What is your mission? What are your long-term goals? What is your reputation? What is your capacity? What does your market look like? How big is it? What is its compliance culture? And so on and so on. I would argue that if you look at all these strategies from a bit of a distance, there are really just 5 core approaches to supervision. So there's compliance-based, industry-centered, responsive, risk-based, and problem-focused. Interestingly, which core approach is more fashionable seems to depend at first on the type of regulation. So financial regulation, for instance, it's all about risk-based supervision. But in environmental regulation, the responsive approach is in fact more common. But what's fashionable also seems to depend on region. So, for example, in the Netherlands, where I currently live, the problem-focused approach is increasingly popular. So for this post, let's talk a bit about risk-based supervision. Right. Now, I find that if 5 people are talking about this type of approach, they may actually mean 5 different things without even realizing it. Now, obviously, if you want to have a fruitful discussion, that's not very helpful. So in this post, I distinguish a number of supervision approaches which are all referred to as risk-based. So hopefully we can clear up some of this implicit confusion. Now, if somebody's referring to risk-based supervision, they may simply be talking about setting priorities. Right? So they may be prioritizing their risks based on probability versus impact, or they might have a more elaborate system. But you might also be referring to your entire supervision process. So that would include not only setting priorities, but rather an entire set of procedures, processes, systems. So this is typically, I guess, what people mean if they're referring to we are implementing risk-based supervision. Now, people also tend to refer to risk-based supervision when they're talking about supervising corporate risk controls. So this, I would say, is a particular method of executing risk-based supervision. It's also referred to as system-based supervision. So this is typically also what accountants tend to do when they're auditing a large firm. Now, some agencies seem to implicitly assume that risk-based supervision is about the risks that individual firms pose to their supervision mission. But you might also approach risk at a higher level, addressing risk posed by an industry segment, an industry, or an entire market. And in my experience, the level at which you primarily work makes a huge difference for what you do every day and also for what kind of results you come up with. And finally, supervising risk-based might not be so much about the way you work, but more about your own scope or perspective. So if somebody's talking about risk-based supervision in this sense, they may simply mean that they're not only looking at the law, but they're also addressing risks to their mission, to their stakeholders, or to society. So to avoid confusion, the next time you talk to somebody about risk-based supervision, it might be useful to find out what they mean by that. So what do you mean by risk-based supervision? Are you talking about priority setting? Are you talking about your methods? Or perhaps about your perspective? Do you look at risk primarily from an individual firm perspective? Or perhaps an industry or a market perspective? So do you suspect people sometimes mean different things when they talk about risk-based supervision? Let us all know in the comment section, or let me know at supervisionstrategy.com. I'd love to hear from you. So the next post will reflect on all the different dilemmas and trade-offs that we experience every day in regulation or supervision practice. And we'll discuss what could be good ways to deal with those dilemmas. Until then, thank you for watching and thank you for working on supervision.